The Studio is a new series on Apple TV Plus that begins streaming on March 26th and is created by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, who you know from stuff like Superbad, Pineapple Express, This Is the End. They've established themselves as huge names in the comedy genre. And this follows Matt Remick, played by Seth Rogen, a man who has been just elevated to the position of the main studio executive over at Continental Studios. And throughout the season, basically you follow him and the other people that he works with as they're trying to just keep things afloat in an industry that is constantly changing. And if you're somebody who follows Hollywood at the moment and sees everything that's going on, this taps into a lot of those aspects and shows you just how much goes on in the background when it comes to saying yes to some things, saying no to other things, and making the hard decisions that may or may not necessarily make everybody happy, but sometimes they might be decisions that could be necessary, or vice versa. And all of this is done with a satirical approach, as you expect from Rogen and Goldberg. Going into the show, I was very curious to see how this would play out, because I think if anyone has a finger to the pulse right now when it comes to what's happening in the film industry in general, there's a lot going on. And it's not always good news. And some of it can feel very, very bleak. And I think people who are at the front lines of it, those who have been on the creative side of things when it comes to, not just acting, but also writing and directing when it comes to Rogen and Goldberg, you can see that there is an understanding of all of it, just exactly how all of these things come together. And that is embedded in the DNA of this show, because what you get over here is also a very well-rounded exploration of the film industry, but also one that is a love letter to movies in general. Like every now and then you will see something and you'll think to yourself, well, that's terrible. I mean, that is very much mirroring a piece of information I just read about in the news. But at the same time, whenever you get to stuff that's happening when it's being filmed, there is a love that is shown through Remick's eyes, because he just loves movies. And it also acts as a love letter to Hollywood and when it comes to cinema in general. And the way it balances those two aspects of it makes for an incredible show. I think as far as their efforts go, their collaborations go, I think Rogen and Goldberg, this is like their best work so far. It is so well-rounded and it is so tightly scripted and perfectly paced. I was loving every single episode of it. I saw the entire season almost in one single sitting. It's 10 episodes, and I think I couldn't stop watching. Like the first 8 episodes I saw in one shot. And it's all filled with incredible performances from everybody. Seth Rogen is such a dynamic presence when it comes to the work that he's done in film. He's able to do comedy really, really well, but also when it comes to some serious stuff, he's able to pull those moments off very effectively too. And I think with the studio, as a studio executive, having to, play both versions of Seth Rogen at times, he does a really great job. And he is outrageously funny over here, but also very, very effective, once again, in the more serious moments when shit gets real. And he is able to balance those tones very well. And that applies to the entire cast. When Ike Barinholtz, Chase Sui Wonders, Catherine O'Hara, Catherine Hahn, all of them are extraordinary. And they match up to exactly what the show is building around itself in perfect ways. And that applies to everybody else who shows up along the way. Like if you hear a name drop in this, rest assured you're about to see that actual person. So I believe this has been revealed in the marketing as well, but like in the trailers. But if you see someone go like, hey, Martin Scorsese wants to talk about something, Martin Scorsese is showing up. Like you will see him in the show. In that sense, it evokes things like Entourage, which also dealt a lot with Hollywood in general, and you have those hints of that sprinkled in here. And also a lot of The Player with Tim Robbins, that movie. There's a bunch of that in here as well when it comes to some stuff with Remick as the executive, as well as the other characters that I mentioned in the show, the other actors. They're also, portraying a lot of studio executive kind of characters. And there's also a surprising amount of comedy in physical form to this. Like there are moments where there is legit property damage and stuff that happens with these actors at the center of it, very much also evoking things that Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen they've done before. And so you get to see a little bit of that in there too. It's like this mix of a bunch of stuff, but it all works very, very effectively. In fact, there's a couple of episodes where some really crazy stuff happens, like in terms of scale. And it's very, very well executed. I also want to point out how wonderfully shot the entire show is. It is gorgeous to look at. There's a lot of long tracking shots and sequences with a ton of dialogue, and it never loses you for even a second. You are constantly riveted by everything that's happening, and the characters are so investing that you are following along with everything that's going on with them. Sometimes if you think a character is not getting enough shine, if they eventually do give that character a lot to work with. For a moment, you might think Quinn, Chase Sui Wonders, she's not getting a lot to do because sometimes she's sidelined quite a bit. And then there is times during the season where there's a chunk of the episode that goes towards her, and there's a whole thing going on with her, and they're able to hit all of the marks that they need to hit. And all of the subplots and things that they're building up on the side, it all comes together very, very well by the end of the season. I was very, very happy with how they were able to pull all of these things off. There's also constant references, as you'd expect when it comes to this kind of a show. When it comes to being a love letter for movies especially, there are so many different references and Easter eggs in there that, you know, especially if you're somebody who is very much into films, you're gonna have a great time pointing at a lot of things. It's gonna be like every 5 minutes you'll have that version of, like, you know, the meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood now with DiCaprio pointing at the screen. It's very funny how much that happens when it comes to this. And there's also constantly references being made to works from Rogen and Goldberg that, you know, like good parallels that are made to those things. Like you'll see directors and actors who have, you know, worked on stuff with them before or had them in their projects before. And it all that's very fun to see. There's a couple of times when they're talking about the magic of long tracking shots and one takes. And it's very funny because they'll often reference things like Birdman. It's like, how amazing was it when Birdman and things like that did it? And the music in this show is composed by Antonio Sanchez, who is the composer of Birdman. So, you know, the fact that they were able to bring those things together as, you know, seamlessly as they do and make it that kind of fun treasure hunt in the process as well really does speak to the fact that they gave a lot of thought to making the show happen as well as it you know, does happen. And by the end of it, I was in love with what they did with the studio. I think this is one of the best new shows I've seen, and I highly recommend checking it out. I feel like Apple right now is on a very good streak, especially with things like Severance going on, which is phenomenal television. So just to see them continuing that path with shows like the studio makes me really happy to see it. And I'm gonna give the studio an A. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. I hope you guys enjoyed the studio. It starts streaming, like I said, on March 26th. So make sure you mark your calendars for that. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again. And hope you guys enjoy the show.